Hello and welcome to the Beyond Enough podcast. I am so excited to be joined by another absolutely incredible guest today, a fellow female entrepreneur who has chosen to go beyond enough, who's chosen to start a business, to serve other women, and very much in the area of expertise of mindset. So I'm going to let the most incredible Erin introduce herself, and then we will go from there.
For those that don't know me, I am Erin Taylor and I am a mindset mentor. And I have been on a journey the last 3 years since I started my business. However, more recently, I have stepped into more of the limiting belief side of stuff. So helping female business owners to really work through the limiting beliefs that they hold about themselves. And why I am so passionate about this is because over the last 3 years, I have worked with so many incredible females, and there's just some little thing that's holding them back. And when we break through these limiting beliefs that they're holding about themselves, that is the key to their success. So this is what I'm diving into now that I am fully self-employed as of 4 weeks ago, which has been an incredible journey. So I'm so excited to share a little bit more about things.
Yes! Oh my goodness. That is so exciting. And I think there are so many women who will be listening to this who have that as a goal, right? To leave their 9 to 5 and be fully in their business and really lean in and step away from probably the job that's caused them to look for for another option. So I absolutely love that. And we're going to find out how you made that possible. But I would love to hear from you firstly on how mindset and all of the things around mindset came into your life. Like, how did that enter into your life? And I guess eventually
Definitely. So
lead
for
you into
me,
starting your own
I've always
business.
kind of been interested in this side of stuff, but it was just literally before COVID. I had been in my role as a family support worker from 21. As soon as I left uni, I knew that I wanted to help people. And that's what I've always been very, very good at from a young age. I've always been that person that everybody goes to for advice or just needs to kind of like sound off, like the drunk girl bathroom. I am always the person that everybody like spills the life to. And in school, I was always the one chatting a little bit too much, but now I've made a business out of it. So here we are. And I just felt like within the family support worker role, you're helping people, but you're always helping people that don't always want to be helped. And for me, that became quite difficult because I'm always trying to see the positive in the situation and helping them to see like how they can move forward. And unfortunately, for whatever reasons, whether that's trauma or difficulties that they've been through, they didn't always want to change. Over time, I was starting to get less job satisfaction. And I knew that I wanted to help people and I wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper into things. And so I was asking a few people I thought about maybe being a therapist or like counselling, all that side of stuff. And then somebody said, oh, I've trained as a coach. I trained through this academy. Why don't you? They have free events. Why don't you go to it? So I'd just gone through a breakup and I was like, you know what have I got to lose? So took myself off to Leeds for the night, went on this 2-day experience. And I was just like, I rang my mum. I was in the train station on the way back and I was like, Mum, I know what I want to do. And she was like, what? And I was like, I'm going to be a coach. And then my mum's like, okay, Erin. And I was like, no, Mum, this time, like, I really do want to do this. So I invested thousands and I was like, I'm going to do it. Then we hit COVID. And obviously everybody's life just went a little bit mental. And I moved back to Cumbria for a little while from Newcastle. And a lot of things happened in work through that time. Obviously, a lot of people going very challenging circumstances. And I went through some really, really difficult times within my family support worker role. And it really tested me. And it just made me realise that I can help people, but in a different way. So I spent 2 years really focusing on getting my studies done alongside working full time. And I took the leap nearly 3 years ago. And obviously this has been a journey within itself. But for me, I learned so much becoming a coach and how much that when you focus on your mindset, it can change your whole life. So yeah, that was kind of like a whistle stop tour. Sorry, I've just really spoke there. But I think for me, it was that I had such a positive experience on it and it changed my life. And I was like, if it can change mine, it can change other people's.
And I love that. I think so many of the women, the female entrepreneurs, especially coaches that I speak to, do what they do because they went through that transformation themselves initially and really saw the power of, I guess, it's easy, I think, sometimes to forget, especially when you work in the online space, that working on your mindset, doing subconscious belief work, energy work, anything along these lines is still considered quite
A bit woo-woo.
unusual, shall we say, a bit woo-woo, which is fine. like we're here for the woo woo, but doing work on your mindset, I think, is still kind of a relatively new concept, although I do feel like it is becoming wider known. So what would you say to someone who is maybe at the start of their mindset journey? What was that thing or things that made the biggest difference to you when you kind of started out
I
on
think
that
for
on
me,
your
it
own
was,
journey?
and I was talking about this because I think over the last few weeks, with me having such a big shift and going full time, I've really gone back to what has got me to this point, because people see me now, they see me as confident Erin that can show up online, she can come on a podcast and just talk quite easily about her journey and what she's been through. However, if you had met me 6 years ago, I couldn't do this. And for me, what started off was I remember reading the book The Law of Attraction, and it was COVID, sunny, I was in the garden, and it said just you can just think positively and your life can change. And I was and it talked about obviously like winning the lottery and all that side of stuff. And I was like, well, I can't just think I'm going to win the lottery and it's going to happen. And I actually said this on a masterclass that I was hosting this week. I was like, you can't just think it, you've got to take the action. And for me, that was the key part. So when we're starting off, I was a little bit skeptical around, well, if you can just think positive, things are going to happen. That isn't just the thing. It's like I was listening to a podcast today. It was like all about like manifestation and how somebody's saying, I don't really believe in it. Absolutely could get that. But you've just got to trust in the process. And I think for a lot of people, we want to see those instant results. So like, you know, when you order something off Amazon, you get it next day. You order something off ASOS, you can get it next day now. With mindset, that doesn't happen. You can't just think positively for a day, or you just do one thing, or you just journal once and then your whole life's going to change. You've got to trust in the process, but without knowing what that end result might look like sometimes. And I think that that would be the message I'd give to somebody, is that you've got to trust the process. But if you know what you're working towards and what you want in life, you've just got to make sure you stay on that path, and things are going to come along. They're going to try and push you off. And what I describe it is imagine that you're on the motorway. If you're looking around at all the different lanes, well, you're going to sway, you're going to hit something, you're going to go off the road. That's not what you want. You just need to be so tunnel vision in what you're doing. And yes, you might sway a little bit, absolutely, but it's making sure you don't go fully off path.
Yes, absolutely. And like you, I love how you said, you might not know exactly what the end destination looks like, but you're just consistently taking action towards what it is that you want, even if that's not super specific. So it's kind of like you don't have full direction, but you're making all these micro choices along the way in which you're developing your mindset, right? Like you're taking the blinkers off and saying, actually, there is so much possibility if I just keep consistently taking action towards the feeling that I want, the confidence that I want, whether it's in business, whether it's in your career, even in motherhood, right? Like, as long as we're taking that consistent action towards how we want to feel about this area of our life, the opportunities do find
Absolutely. And I was talking
their
about this
way
the other
in.
day around fear. And I think that a lot of the time is that when things get hard and the fear comes up, we stop. When the fear comes up, that's when we need to keep going. That's when we need to push through, because that on the other side of that is what you want and that result that you're working towards. But a lot of the time, because it feels uncomfortable, and it does, and when you're working through your limiting beliefs or you're working through regulating your nervous system, your body wants to keep you safe. So it's going to do everything it can to keep you in that same state. Even though you know it's not right for you, it's still safe. It's like when people say if they've been in difficult relationships or abusive relationships, and especially what I saw within the family support worker role, people get frustrated that why they're going into another one. Even though it's wrong, it's safe to them because that's maybe the relationships they've seen as a child and have been around them, and it's what they've been used to the whole time. So what our body wants, it craves safety, whether it is good or bad.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think we do get stuck in patterns of behavior, but we also get stuck in patterns of thinking, believing, all these other things. And that's what mindset's about, right? Like, you're the expert here. I'm going to let you, I guess, explain from your point of view the power of and the power and the value of taking your mindset seriously, and how that personally helped you go from someone, like you say, who really struggles with confidence, who's stuck in this role that is really starting to feel difficult and not bringing you that fulfillment anymore, into someone who has now built a business up and actually fully fledged.
Yeah, and I think it is
on your own.
It takes time, and I think that's what people don't see. And I think that I always try and be as honest and open as possible, is that it's like that whole what are you doing behind the scenes? And if on the surface you're saying that you're doing all these things, but behind the scenes that you're not following through with what you say you're going to do, that's where you'll feel that resistance and things will feel uncomfortable. And don't get me wrong, I'm not on my A game every single day, but what I do really try and do is make sure that I'm following through and I'm building the habits of what I say I'm going to do. And with your mindset, because you're rewiring something that's been for a certain way. So for like me, I'm nearly 30 now, and I have thought a certain way for such a long period of time. Naturally, your mind will go to what you've always thought because that neural pathway is so hardwired. However, what I talk about is rather than viewing your mind as something that's like solid and it can't be changed, we want to see it as like Play-Doh, so it's malleable. And obviously there's so much more research now into actually neuroplasticity and how our brain develops, and that actually as an adult, we can change things, but it does feel harder because we're not, when our brain's developing most between 0 to 7, that's when we're learning things. We're trying to like unwire it. And that's why it's so important to have a coach as well, because those times when things get harder and you want to shy away, or that fear that I was just speaking about before, they can help you to push through. And that's why having a coach is so important. So even for me, I know it all, but I have my own coaches because there's still limiting beliefs that I need to work through. There's still mindset shifts that I need to make, because at the end of the day, with your mindset, I used to think that I was like, right, I'll get to this point and I'll be fixed and like everything will just be fine. But as you go along that journey, you need to understand that it's a process you're going to be going through. And once you get into it, you just know it's like a lifelong commitment, isn't it? To like growing and changing yourself.
A billion percent. It's an ever growing, ever changing, ever evolving. Yeah, there's the word, evolving. It's an ever evolving process. And I think the exciting part for me actually is like every time you kind of hit a next level, there's new challenges and there's new opportunities. And like you say, we then need to work our way through those. But the fact that I think once you start this work, and it does get heavy sometimes, like you say, there is so much fear. I think, we can talk about the challenges of, I guess, just women and, not even being a woman in business. And there's so many challenges, there's so much fear around that. But to be able to get, I think, even to that first point where you realize, actually, I can do this, like I can have control over what I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, and see the value in it, it's then not quite so scary to then walk through the next challenge and the next block and the next obstacle, whatever that may be, because you've kind of got that experience now and I can trust myself, right? Like I can trust myself to make
And I
changes
think that how
in my
empowering
life.
is that we've got the control. And I think some people get really scared of that. However, imagine knowing that you have got the opportunity to change how you think and that things don't have to stay the same. And I think that if somebody, going back to your question before, if like somebody is starting, I would suggest investing in a coach, because to start with, it feels uncomfortable. You're like, am I doing it right? Or like, should I be pushing a bit harder in this area? And having that person where you've got that accountability as well, because I think that's just so important. Because at the end of the day, if something gets hard, like I said before, you will stop yourself. And if you've got other life things going on, or you've got people around you that don't get it, and I joke about this all the time, like my friends, when I first started, they were just like, what is this? And I was like, look, guys, it's going to change your life. And like, they've come along this journey with me, bless them. But now I've started to look more into, I've done so much mindset work, but there's still parts of me that are holding back. And through this, what I've started to read a lot about and like listen to research is all around how much your body holds on to that trauma, or how much your stores everything. And I was like,
Yes.
this is the next thing for me to work on. So I've been going to sound baths. My friends do think it's a little bit woo-woo. And I think that it's hard, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, you've just got to find your people that will go with you or get it. And if you're then speaking to somebody and every time you're getting a response of like, I don't understand why you're doing that, I don't know why you're journaling, like that doesn't work, it's going to affect you. But the thing is, you either talk to the people that get it and then you just go, okay, well, I'll speak to them about somebody else. Or this is where you start to shift and change who you associate with. And that's when we talk about like why you need to get really clear on what your values are. So your values are things that shape your life. And my values in my early 20s are very different now as I'm moving into my 30s. And it's okay with that as well. But it's learning that actually my values are going to change. And if people who are in your life aren't aligning with that, it's feeling confident enough and then being able to set that boundary of that, actually, I can't tolerate that anymore. I don't respect that. And being able to own it as well. And I know lots of women struggle with that.
100%. There is so much fear. I actually think that puts a lot of women off starting on this journey because they're so afraid of being alone. And actually, like you say, coming back to that kind of that safety in the known, I think it's really hard to walk away from friendships even when you know they're maybe not serving you. I think it's hard to distance yourself from family if they are not aligned with the things that you are, and they're not necessarily maybe supporting you or lifting you up, right? Like that could be really scary. And I think certainly throughout parts of my own journey, it's been really lonely. So what's your thoughts on that? Do you feel like that kind of loneliness aspect impacts women? And tell me a bit about, I guess, how important community is. Like you say, they
Definitely.
are
And I think
finding your
that if we
people,
think
finding
back
your
to
tribe.
how we grew up as hunter gatherers, we needed to be part of a tribe, didn't we? And if you weren't part of that and you were on the outside, you were really, really vulnerable. So we've got to think back to how our brains are developed is still very hardwired to that kind of like tribal part of us. That's like the reptile part, which is develops like the back part of our brain is what develops first, isn't it? And then as we move through the years, we start to get the emotional side, and then we get the cognitive side of like where we learn how to communicate. However, what is instinct in us is that fight or flight response, which a lot of people are speaking about at the moment, of like being in that stress response or how you respond to things. And with that community side is like, if you are seen as an outsider, that feels really uncomfortable. And that's something that comes instinct with us. However, if you are doing the personal development work, you're doing the mindset work, and you're really clear on what your why is. And what I mean by this is why you are making this decision. And I think this is where a lot of people go wrong, is that they might see somebody else making a decision, or they might read something online and think, oh, that resonates with me a little bit. But they're not sure on why you're making that decision. For me, recently, I have gone through some massive life changes. So, like I said at the start of the podcast, I lived in Newcastle. At the start of the year, I left Newcastle to move back to live with my parents because I knew that I wanted to go fully in on the business. And within that, me and my partner separated, and we'd been in a long-term relationship. And I knew that what I wanted from the future, my life in that moment wasn't aligning with that anymore. And with making those decisions, kind of I've had to trust and be really clear on what my why is for why I'm making that decision. And I think that's what the part that a lot of people skip, is that like, okay, well, I'm feeling this certain way and I want to get here, but your why is what drives you. So the days when I thought, God, do I really want to move? Like, living in Newcastle is very different to living in Cumbria. I've lived in Cumbria before. There was a reason I moved, and da 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 da. And you do go through that backwards and forwards. But because I was so clear on why I was making this decision and why I wanted to do this for the future version of Erin, that's what kept me accountable. And it is. And people are going to have different opinions. Like, people might think I've lost the plot. I'm nearly 30 and I'm single, and I've just moved back in with my mum and dad. I don't have a house. Like, I'm not engaged. I don't have kids. But I found my people that get it, and they know why I've made that decision, and they want to see me happy. And it's not that I was terribly unhappy, but I could be happier. And even I'm 4 weeks into this, I can see in myself like the difference I feel in my body, where everything just doesn't feel heavy. I think it's the best way to describe how I was feeling.
Oh my goodness. Firstly, thank you so much for opening up and sharing so vulnerably with us. I think any one of those things is like a really huge life change, right? Like even one of those things separately is a lot for one person to take. But I loved that you said, I'm nearly 30, I've got no kids, like my life doesn't look like perhaps other people around me, or maybe what society says is success for a woman of my age. But actually, this is something that so excites you and so brings you joy. And actually being able to move back to your parents' house and go fully in your business is something that makes you happy. So why shouldn't you do that, right? Like, just because you don't have these, I love to call it vanity metrics, right? Like these things that for some reason we keep ourselves bound to, instead of choosing, like you have, the freedom to decide what makes us happy.
Definitely. And I think that, and this is why that limiting belief side of stuff, there was so much that could have come up for me around actually, like, you should be doing this. And the old version of me stayed in relationships far too long that weren't healthy. They didn't make me happy. And within that, it maybe felt that I needed to stay in this because, when you're in a relationship, you sometimes get in these circles. And then if you split up with them, you're out of the circle, blah, blah, blah. And that so many people stay in that situation because the fear of what that might look like. And like I said, people have said to me, how have you done it? And it's because I'm so clear on what I want and why I'm making these decisions. And that's why you've just got to keep going. Like, I didn't know what my life was going to look like. I could have moved back here and I could have absolutely hated it, but I just had to trust that this was the path that I needed to go on and I'd figure it out. And I think that it's just having that deep sense of trust in yourself. And so many of us don't trust ourselves. And that's because maybe we haven't really sat with what ourselves and spent time thinking, like, what that I want, spent time.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's actually really difficult. We were talking earlier about what would you say to that woman or that individual that was kind of starting off on this personal development mindset journey. But it is actually really hard. I think by the point you decide to go on it, you've done a lot of the work, right? Like, you've taken that internal decision, something needs to change, and that something has to come from me. But actually getting to that point, self-awareness in itself is actually really difficult. It's difficult to teach, and it's a hard pill to swallow in a world where we're always just selling you a very quick solution. To say to someone, you're going to go on this really long journey, like, I'll hold your hand through it, but it's going to require you to reflect on some really difficult parts of who you are and difficult things that have happened to you in order to understand actually how you claim more for yourself in your life. You have to kind of do the hard stuff, and I sometimes think it's a bit of a hard sell, right? Like, take this long path with me when there's so many, I guess, quick and easy distractions or solutions that actually are just so surface level. They're not actually bringing in that change
Definitely.
that people
And I think
really
that
desire.
people look at it is, and that there is a lot of quick sells online. And what I always say is that it's not. You've got to do that deep work. You might have some things where it'll just click instantly and you think, oh yeah, that's what I need to be doing, or that actually that feels better within that moment, but you've got to keep doing it. And I was talking to one of my clients earlier, and she's come such a long way. And we were talking about how that she's feeling great at the moment. And I'm like, don't stop. Because that's what sometimes people do, is that they do it and then if they start to feel good and they're like, oh, well, actually, I don't need to do my morning routine anymore. I don't need to do my journaling anymore. And then they'll come back and they're like, Erin, things have just gone really, really wrong. I'm feeling X. And I'm like, so have you been journaling recently? And they're like, no. Spent time on your own? No, well, I've just been so busy and I've just got so much going on in my life. And this is what I have done over the last few months, is like, I could have been like, right, I've got so much going on. I'm not going to have time to make sure that my nervous system's regulated. I'm not going to have time to do my morning routine. But I knew I had to keep these things really stable to get me through, because if not, when you're going through those big challenges, and I always say this to clients, this is the time you need to double down on things. Don't take your foot off the gas with your mindset stuff, because that's what's got you to this point. And to get you through the other side, that's what you need to keep doing.
100%. Like, I could not agree with you more. And I see it a lot with if you work with clients, especially in this arena, it's going to happen, of course. And, as a coach, you hold them through with so much love through those moments, because we've all been there. But it is almost instinctual to pull right back, right? To shrink. And I guess that's probably a fawn response, right? Like, we just shrink and we stop reaching out and connecting with the people that bring us up, and we stop doing the things like going outside that actually really help, and we pull back. And it's so interesting you're saying that as well, because I've experienced it personally, and I've also had so many clients that have also had that exact response. But like you say, we have to keep consistently taking these actions despite what's going on around us, so that we can rebuild that pattern, rebuild that cycle, and eventually it does start to click into place, that we don't fall back into that old way of doing things, and that we can go forward with a new way. So I love that. Thank you. I would love you to tell me a little bit about your decision making to being full-time in the business and stepping away from your previous role. And also, I guess, what the biggest challenges have been for you in doing that. And
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
and I think
your biggest challenges, I guess.
When I started the business, my goal was always to be full-time. That was my aim. And I was like, I know it's going to take time. And some people said, just go all in. And for me, I know I need bits of security. So I couldn't just jump all in, quit my job. And then, how people just go all in. Like, I know that doesn't work for me. And this is why you've got to spend that time and really know yourself. Because if somebody had said that to me, that would have tipped me over the edge. And I'm not, like, as much as I thrive under pressure sometimes, and I'm trying to get out of that, because I know that's not great for our nervous system, etc. But I think for me, like I said before, I knew there was something that I wasn't feeling quite as fulfilled in my job role. And I've always wanted to help and support people. And I feel that I am very good at that. I am an empath, and I can help people to see what it is they need to change, but also through that quite quickly, but also through that I can help them to see it themselves. So this is why I love coaching, because it's future focused, but also you have all the answers. Whereas if you're not into coaching, you won't get that, but you genuinely do. So I don't tell people what to do. I guide it out of them and help them to see that this is what they want to do, and that's going to take them towards it. And when I worked in children's services, I am working with people that have had their children removed or are potentially having their children removed, and is a very, very difficult time for somebody. However, when you're in the court arena, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z. So basically, I come in, they're told by the social worker, you need to work with Erin, the family support worker. She's going to do X, Y, and Z with you. That's very different to what the approach that I use in coaching. So I was already somewhat coaching in a way, because when I went in there, yes, I've got a guideline of the work I needed to be doing to help them get their children back, or evidence why they could not get their children back in some areas. But I would say, what is it you feel like you need to do that's going to help you to get your children back? Or what have you done that has caused for your children to be removed? Is that something you can continue? And then when you come in with that approach, you're empowering them. And that is the key to it. So when you work with people, you need to empower them, not tell them. Like, if you come on here and you say today, Erin, we're going to do this podcast and we're going to talk about these specific topics and we can't go off track. That is going to be really difficult, because that's maybe not how my brain works. Or actually, well, I might think this is something that your listeners really wants to listen to. Whereas what we come on, you give that opportunity, you give me the floor to say, this is what we're talking about. We move flexibly. And I think this is what people need. They need to feel empowered of, and especially in a situation like that, is that they have got very little control. And what I'm telling them is like, in this small area, you tell me what you think you need to do and how we can get you to that point that you're working towards. And I think that as I was coming to the end, it was hard, because I knew I was good at that job and had the evidence, because I've got 9 years, nearly 10 years of experience doing it. I've only got 3 years of running a business, but I've got no evidence that I can run a business full time. I did it while working at the council and working like really long days. I had this evidence, but I had to come in and I had to really work through the limiting beliefs of, okay, there's not going to be that instant success, or even like the financial side of stuff. Like, I've worked like for 10 years, I had that stable income. I knew what I was getting each month. And for me, I've had to do a lot of like the money mindset work, because obviously when you're self-employed, you don't always have that stable income coming in. And I think that for me, it was like knowing I could move back to my parents. Obviously, I'm very fortunate around that, but also I lost a little bit of control around that. And that is something that I've had to work through a lot. And my body has resisted it sometimes. So I've had to do a lot of work with like the EFT tapping, like the meditation, the visualization, and really get into the point where I'm like, I know it will come, but I need to stop resisting it as well, if that's making sense.
100%. Again, I absolutely love that you touched on that, because there's so much around money. And when I say there's so much, I mean there's so much in terms of mindset, there's so much in terms of subconscious belief and unconscious beliefs. There's so much fear around money, but there's also so much stigma, right? Like, there's so many stories about money. I've actually just started reading You're a Badass at Making Money, because everyone kept recommending this book to me. And I similarly had to do a lot of money mindset when it came to business. But we do have a lot of kind of preconceptions about money, having a lot, not having a lot, what that means to us as people. Like, we tie it with our worth, we tie it with our success. It's a whole thing, especially for female entrepreneurs, because I guess if you're to look at a traditional business model, you're supposed to come in, make lots of money, and then get out, right? And that's not the type of businesses that a lot of us are building.
A lot of that comes with like how your beliefs are wired as a child. And I think that this is what I speak to clients a lot about. For me, especially, I was always told like, just save for a rainy day. So like, I'm saving, but I'm like, got to the point when I was like, well, when's the rainy day coming? Or like, I don't know, it was always like, just save for a house. And I'm like, I don't want to buy a house at the moment. And from what I observed as a child, my mum, she's incredible, but she never like put herself first. And that's then what I learned. If we're going back to when your brain develops, and then I saw other females in my family that didn't put themselves first. And then I'm now saying that this is something I need to do. Well, that's really hardwired of not doing that. And this is why it's so important for people to go back and do the limiting belief work. And it's like doing the whole backwards to come forwards, or do like the inner child healing and just to quickly touch on this, but I was doing a masterclass the other night and I came off, and then I'm in a membership at the moment, and my coach was like, come on, we're doing inner child healing. This is right up your street. And I was like, I've just done a masterclass for like 40 minutes. I was like, do I go in? And then she was just starting this visualization. And I went in, and she got us into a really like meditated state, and she took us back to like our inner child of like when I was younger. And it took me to like when I was 7. And then she got you to go through this door. And on the other side of the door was my nana and granddad, and they absolutely loved me. And like I was their only granddaughter, I was their first grandchild. And when I walked in there, I just felt this like love. And I was like, honestly, I was in tears. I was crying on this call because it took me to a place where like I felt so loved and safe. And that's what my body needs at the moment. With all this change I've been through, like my body needs to know I'm safe, because when your body is safe, that's when you can move forward, when you can actually accept the success that you are wanting. And I can't even tell you how much I needed that. And honestly, I was sobbing. And this is why it's so important. So when people are saying that, like, moving forward, absolutely. But within that, what the key message there is that you need to go backwards to somewhere that, for me, for a long time, I always felt quite average. I was never really good at anything, but I wasn't really like bad at anything. I just sailed. But what I'm doing at the moment is I am trying to stand out, because that's what you've got to do as a business. And secondly, I am trying to build something that makes me not average anymore. And when I was in the family support worker role, I could be average. Yes, I was good at my job. I got great results for families, etc. But I was still quite average, because like I wasn't like the head of service. I was just like bobbing along in this. And I've had to really go back and rewire that. But I've also had to heal my inner child that had a belief that actually you're just average. You've got through life till now fine, but you're wanting to change that. And you need to know that you're loved and you're safe. And whatever you do, whatever money I earn, doesn't mean that my family are going to love me anymore. They love me now, and so do my friends and the people that are important to me.
I love that so much. I love that so much. Thank you again. Thank you for being so vulnerable and open with us and sharing that. I think so many of our listeners will just resonate with that so much, because I think, again, like even on a conscious level, you know that the amount of money doesn't make people love you more or less. To actually go through the process of unlearning that, as in your body, your nervous system, and your mindset, is, I think when you get to the other side of that, you can't even, I can't even explain to people how incredible it feels to actually just feel neutral. Because for so long I was in that fight or flight and I didn't even know that's where I was. But now that I'm not, I'm like, wow, this is how it feels to just be cool, to just be like on that neutral playing field and not be all over the place. My nervous system to be like terrified of everything and anything, and have this really high base level of anxiety that just did not need to be there. I think that we don't always
realise it. And I went to therapy, and I've been out of therapy for probably about a year and a bit now. And I went because I'd gone through some really difficult stuff at work, and it really questioned if I was actually good at my job anymore, because I've been through some really difficult times. And I was like, I just need to know, because people kept basically saying to me, like, you sure you don't need time off work? And I was like, no, I'm fine. And they were like, you sure? Like, I would have been off. And then I was like, for me, and because I was doing all this mindset work alongside it, I was like, I was taking the time outside of work. But for me, I was like, if I wasn't able to save some people that within my role, but I was like, if I'm here, I can hopefully help and save like other people, and I can help and support them. And I remember going to speak to a therapist, and like I told them like everything I've been through, and then there's other bits in like my personal life. And I was like, am I gonna have a breakdown? And then she said to me, she said, no, because I can hear you've got so much resilience in you. And I can't tell you that when I got off that phone call, I like cried, because I was like, I'm not going to have this breakdown that everybody keeps telling me that I should be expecting. Or what I've seen other the families that I work with is like they'd have the breakdown, and I was like, is mine coming? Because if it is, can it just come now? Because I'm like, get it over and done with. But because that's all I'd ever seen was like you go through all this trauma, and like I had my work questioned, which it had to be because of what had happened. But it causes you to really then question yourself. If somebody's questioning you, you then can't help but question yourself. And obviously, as I've grown, I know that I can do it. And it was just a really, really unfortunate couple of circumstances I went through. But when she said you've got the resilience, nobody had ever told me I was resilient before. And I was like, oh, this woman's listened to me for like 50 minutes and she can tell I'm resilient. I was like, okay, I think I've got this. And honestly, that was probably the moment where I was like, if I can go through all this shit that I've unfortunately been through, I was like, I can do anything.
Yes! That's such a common theme, by the way, like with these interviews, is women being like, I went through this horrible set of circumstances, came out the other end and just went, yeah, fuck it, everything's going to be fine. That seems to be like such a common thread, but I love it. How, like, back to the start of this conversation, right? That empowerment piece, someone just giving you that little perspective shift and saying, no, you are resilient. And then allowing you to just be like, it's like permission. Yes, I am resilient. I can absolutely do this. Oh my goodness, Erin, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing so openly and vulnerably about your story. I am going to link Erin's details below this episode so that you can go and check her out. And I hope you do. She is absolutely fantastic. And you can find out a little bit more about what she does, what she's got going on just now. And again, Erin,
thank you so much for
absolutely
love
being
this conversation.
Here.
Thank you.
Me too. And we'll see you soon. Right, there we go. That should be it stopped. Hey, okay, it needs a little second.